Teacher Survivalist Module 7, Bringing the Outside In and Leaving the Inside Out, Work-Life Balance During Short and Long-Term Breaks. Who is your vacation persona? Seriously, life has changed so much for us over the years. So in Module 7 of the Teacher Survivalist Professional Development, you're going to be looking back over the life cycle to determine how you spent breaks in your youth up until now, and how you might be able to bring back some of that levity to your earlier years when you were on spring break, winter break, fall break, whatever it may have been. As we get older, we lose a sense of play. We lose a sense of freedom, which is a big topic of Module 7. We're going to discuss in detail how this evolution progresses, and then in the companion resource for Module 7, you'll be creating your own vacation persona. You're going to be looking back and deciding on what characteristics or what person or kind of how you spent your time. How can you bring those back and put them at the forefront of your breaks as you continue on? This is all about mental health. As previous modules have mentioned, it's about kind of taking back ownership of your time at home as well as at work for a more holistic approach to teaching and a holistic approach to overall wellness. In the companion resource, what you'll be doing is listing out the characteristics that you desire in your vacation persona. Think about it. We all want to read a book on vacation, but how many of us actually do it? You're also going to have the opportunity to leave behind some of the vacation persona that you haven't enjoyed, such as cook, cleaner, or just daily responsibility things. And then finally, you'll kind of dedicate a percentage of your vacation time to your new persona. So start thinking about who you are and who you want to be as we approach those short and long-term breaks in teaching. You don't need to try so hard. Realize you're right where you need to be. You had it from the very start. Man, how has spring break changed throughout your life cycle? That's really interesting to consider. How has spring break changed throughout your life cycle? We're going to talk about what your expectations for spring break are and what the reality is, because let's face it, there's a big difference between what you plan to do and what you actually do. And we're going to talk about just, what are the pressures of spring break? What does it even mean? I like to think about it also, what are the pressures of coming back from spring break? Because the expectation is that spring break is a time of rest and relaxation, and you're going to come back renewed and reinvigorated for another amazing end of your school year. And I don't know, is that really how you feel? So welcome to our spring break episode. We're going to jump right in and just talk about how spring break has evolved throughout your life cycle. So whether it's vacation or spring break, you can kind of apply today's episode to any of those situations, because at the end of the day, the expectations, the coming back from, all of those things in regards to any break are going to be the same for spring break. So, I want to just take a minute and look back. So I'll obviously be reflecting on kind of like my experience, and these are going to be very different from person to person. So think about your students, because for some of your students, spring break is a really time. It's a time where they don't get that escapism that they get every day by going to school. And you provide that sanctuary for your students to get away from a lot of the stuff in their life that's not good, because not everybody has that great home life. And being surrounded by it 24/7 can be a real detriment to their experience right now. So we are going to take the perspective then for us as teachers or adults that our spring break is meant to be kind of celebratory, relaxing, those types of things. But, upon returning from spring break, one thing I'd like to mention is you may have had the best spring break of your life. You may feel awesome. You may have read 10 books. You may have gotten the tan. You may have gardened your entire front yard, whatever it may be. But always welcome those students back as the sanctuary that you provide. So one thing I would encourage you to do is just to call out what actually is real. So at that first day of spring break, or coming back from spring break, I always come in with enthusiasm, just like I'm doing with you now. I welcome those kids. It's so good to see you. I hope you guys had a great spring break. I'm going to give it to you right now, just like I would with my students. Ready? Welcome back, guys. I missed you so much. I hope you had a fantastic spring break. We had some beautiful weather, so that is a major positive. But let's face it, not all of you come from amazing home lives. So if spring break was difficult for you, I am so glad to have you back in my bubble. Just know you're back in your safe space. You get to be who you want to be here, and I'm so glad to have you back. All right. So even though they've had possibly a sad, lonely, whatever it might be spring break, they know from the get-go they are back with their favorite person, which is you. Yes, you. You're their favorite person. Whether you believe it or not, you need to treat every day as if you're their favorite person. So be sure to welcome them back in that regard if you can. Now, spring break. Okay, let's see. So when we're young, right? So elementary years, maybe middle years, all that kind of stuff. Spring break is a time of freedom, freedom, freedom. It's all about freedom. So for my children, they're in kindergarten, what spring break has meant to them, we did not do a vacation, was or is freedom. Actually, as I record, I don't know where they are. They've been running the woods. They've been running the neighborhood. They've just been running free, which is such a great lesson for children to learn. And they play with sticks and leaves and friends and people, all leading to what I'm talking about right now, which is they play with freedom. Man, think about that. Play with freedom. Really, they don't even need to be stated together. Play oftentimes is equated to freedom. They should go hand in hand. So my hope for you as adults, as we talk about like what it meant for spring break for young children, that freedom aspect, is that you've had a moment of freedom during your break or during your spring break. I got to go home and see some of my family over spring break, and it's always interesting catching up with them and seeing if they've had any of those moments of freedom. So take a minute and reflect and see if you've had any of that freedom lately or if you can incorporate it in some way. But my kids have been running ragged throughout the neighborhood, and so we're going to get them this little watch so that I can find them because they're so free that they're lost. And as my good friend Kristen said, I don't know if I like that. When I told her that we just let the kids run the neighborhood, she looked at me and she goes, I don't know if I like that for you. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I want the kids to be free. So we're going to do the little watch thing. We'll see how that goes. Early in our years, spring break is freedom, freedom, freedom. Okay, cool. As we go from kind of like middle school, high school years, this is where things may differ a little bit. For some of my friends, spring break in the past was work. Spring break is picking up rocks. Spring break is yard work. Spring break is whatever their parents tell them to do. Just depends. So heading into the kind of those middle school, high school years, for many people, spring break is mission work. It's going out with your church. It's providing service. And let's not forget that a major holiday also typically falls on spring break, Easter. This year that wasn't the case for us, but that's also a component of it as well. So for many people, they're engaged in various types of service. And so that is a great way of also possibly getting a vacation in the sense of like exploring new places and things like that. But that's a big part of it. In my case, you got to be careful here because I still teach, but it was celebratory. So we kind of moved from freedom to celebration in those middle high school years. And that could be worded another way. That could actually be party, maybe. I was talking with one of my students before spring break happened, and I said, what are you going to do? And they said, we're going to senior week. which I think is in Myrtle Beach. And I'm like, oh no. No. We're not doing this like party without parents situation, because that's what I did. But I was trying to tell her, no. And she reassured me that a parent would be with them and all that stuff. But it is a time of celebration, perhaps party mentality during that time. It's more exploratory in nature. So freedom is an exploration, don't get me wrong. But this is kind of an exploration of who you are, who you want to be in this kind of like celebratory feeling. You know, I mean, think about your high school years. There's prom, there's homecoming, there's graduation. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of time for celebration. And who are you as a celebrator? I always think of like back where I'm from, homecoming dances were a big deal. And you would have the hype people who were like rocking it out on the dance floor. They would dance like crazy. They were like the date you wanted to go with if you enjoyed that kind of thing. And then there were always those kids that were like sitting down, typically the guys, sitting down in a chair the whole time, staring with that like nasty face on. They like wanted no part of it. And so their celebration mentality was just like bump on a log. So, and I'm sure there's other categories in there, but that's just what I'm going to talk about now. So, you know, think about those years and kind of what you did. Were you celebratory? Did you have space to actually do those types of things, especially on spring break? I was permitted by my parents to go out and explore. I was permitted to go out with my friends on our own and do spring break the way we wanted to do it. And I learned a lot. People can get carried away here. So parents, I would highly encourage you to keep that communication open with your children that are heading into those years. Really think about what you want their spring break to be. I mean, obviously we're trying to give kids freedom. We're trying to let them discover who they are. But, you know, there is a balance here. You know, stay in the knowing. You can kind of plan safe activities for them that fit within the parameters, but spring break's a tricky one, you know, especially as they head into that 17, 18-year-old range. And as teachers, we'll be getting some of these kids back after senior week, and, you know, they share their stories. I think I told you this in a previous episode, but I would always tell my students, I hear everything and comment on half of it. Same thing with my kids at home. I hear everything. I comment on half of it. As a teacher, you should do the same thing. Butt out. You know, even if you hear it, doesn't mean you should have an opinion on it, unless it's obviously harmful or falls into any of those situations that we have, you know, as teachers, those mandated reporter situations. But just like with my own kids, like you don't have to get involved with everything. So I learned a lot about my students following spring break, and it was insightful. Now we're heading into college years, 20s, and honestly, this is kind of the same. So we're still in kind of like that celebration party mentality throughout the 20s, and even college years. I tend to see a little bit of a snapback, if you will, from students during this time. So once they head off to college, reality sets in. Basically poverty sets in. So maybe they've been living large in high school and they get to college and suddenly they don't have as much money as they used to. So what I mean by the snapback is this is also a time of responsibility. So it's when you'll see kind of like the juxtaposition or the difference between a college student who's like still in party mentality and a college student who's in responsibility mode. And the snapback happens when they come home and they basically like work for money during spring break. So that's very likely. And as teachers, we see this as well. Like, do you want your spring break to be WORK and side hustle? You hear me right now. I am on spring break, and yes, I am spending a portion of my time doing this. But I did make sure that I had lots of time off as well. So there is that responsibility mindset that happens during this time also. Throughout those years. So kind of keep an eye out, look at how your children especially are evolving. Do you notice any of those snapbacks happening? They're a good sign. They definitely show ownership. They show responsibility, especially as they head into kind of like those, junior, senior, even really sophomore years of college, when they're supposed to be kind of getting on focus and those types of things. So I encourage you to kind of keep an eye out and start identifying that. And then as we head into adulthood, let's face it, this is either the time of being an adult, maybe kid-free, or in many of our cases with child. Spring break with child. And this is a much different scenario, a much more different scenario. So here you get to be the provider of freedom or the withholder of fun. The parenting side of spring break kind of sucks, let's face it. It's just different. You don't have the freedom that you did in your youth to just go out and play. But you should. You should be playing any moment you get. So if a kid asks you to slide down the slide at the park, please do it. But during the parents phase of this, what's happening is your kids are leaning on you. I'm bored. What can I do? I'm bored. I need this. So it's very needy as a parent to experience spring break. And it's hard to find, like, who are you during spring break? Do you get the chance to relax? Do you get the chance to have fun on your own? Or are you more of a provider? I'm providing fun. I'm providing camps. I'm providing childcare play dates. I'm just a provider. I'm providing snacks. I'm providing food. That P provider mentality is very draining. Okay, so you may come back from spring break as a teacher excited to be back on your routine and back in the classroom. All of these things are fine. I'm really not trying to come at you with judgment today. I'm trying to come at you with identification. Did you provide your entire spring break? How did that make you feel? Do you want to do it again? No? Okay, great. Let's go put together your spring break persona or your vacation persona so that this does not continue to happen in the future. All right. And a lot of parents take this time to take their kids to Disney or do awesome vacations. Those are all amazing experiences. You're still in provider mode. Hopefully you get a chance to have some fun on your own as well. That's the hardest part. Cruises do a really good job of providing parents the opportunity to still have fun on their own, because there are little kids day out programs or whatever. But with kind of the rest of today's podcast, what I want you to do is just go back, start putting together that spring break persona. How can you incorporate a little bit of your elementary school experience during spring break? How can you incorporate some of your middle school experience, which was still freedom and all of the things that we talked about? I kind of skipped over this, but it's much more socially oriented. In elementary years, it is, don't get me wrong. But as you head into middle school, it's like social seeking or isolation seeking. That can be a dangerous time for kids. And that sounds a little extreme, but if your kid is going inward during all the days of spring break and not wanting to hang out with anybody, maybe it's a time to be a provider and to set up that play date and to get them out. So all of these places kind of have their role. But let's put the puzzle together of your spring break persona as we head into vacation mode, possibly over the summer and beyond. You don't need to try so hard.